Hi everyone, and welcome back to another video. Today we're dropping the Arming Sword and going with the new Warhammer. So in this video I'm just going to do a bit of how it swings, what I think of it. We're going to talk a bit about Slayer Fighter in general towards the end. But first and foremost, we are going to talk Warhammer, and I'm so excited. I mean, I think it's been since playtest 5, and that was Viking Sword, since we've had a new weapon. So it's comparable to the Flange Mace. Minus 25 movement speed, but you get 20% armor pen over the 15% armor pen of the Flange Mace. It kind of fits in there nicely with some solid damage, slightly over the Arming Sword, but as you can tell, maybe a little bit less than the Flange Mace. So, how it swings. Kind of a unique attack pattern. I was expecting more up and down, but we're getting some rights to left and lefts to right until we get that final spiked swing into the top of someone's helmet for the armor penetration. All of them do armor pen, but it just looks cool having that spike swing around and hit. One thing you will notice, and I'm going to show you some more of this when I'm fighting some mobs, the range isn't that impressive. This is very much an in-your-face kind of weapon, which makes it kind of a unique option. You're going to have a difficult time against falchions, and even the Viking Sword, which we'll show an example of. But generally speaking, that's some solid damage on top, 20% armor pen, chewing through a little bit of armor. So before I made this video, I had it in my head I was going to include a lot of content at the end about why Slayer Fighter was struggling, and I'll still include some of that. Maybe the Warhammer will swing that in another direction, I am not sure. I just know right now it is very difficult to trade damage against a lot of classes, and we will take a quick look at the patch notes and just say it gets even worse for our poor Slayer Fighter going forward. Dealing with these mobs, you'll see that initial swing comes out quick, and it is a short, choppy little swing. I miss it a lot when I first start using this weapon. It isn't horrible, but it's certainly not the Arming Sword reach that I'm used to. Also, it comes out quite quickly, so it kind of catches you off guard. Eventually, we do get the hang of it, and I do jump into some PvP quite early, as this is now the new runes map. Well, the new runes rotation, where this is actually solos only runes, which is a unique experience in itself. Makes sense why they toned down some of the gold ore spawns, because solo is a much different world than running in here in duos. First option I had before the timer, which is the 30-minute timer, was like duo goblin caves, and I think they even have a trio goblin caves, which is crazy. Also crazy is we find a green one quite early on, so this is a nice little upgrade, which should help us clear these mobs and also deal with the PvP we're about to run into. So, one of the biggest challenges you have on Slayer Fighter, especially when facing a barbarian, is they usually win in melee range if they're landing their hits. I mean, if they're doing Felling Axe, but even Viking Sword. We're going to discuss this a little later about all the buffs and nerfs, but Viking Sword got a buff. So, it became a little bit more challenging to outrun and also outdamage a barbarian. So, something that was already kind of a challenge has become even increasingly so. We will see if the Warhammer can help us get through this situation, but we're going to soften them up first just to be sure. That first swing is always tricky to land. If you catch him with the second, and the final one, the final overhead smash, is the most satisfying for sure. That right there was worth it. This is my first game running Warhammer, and honestly, it is fun to use just because of that spiked downward smash into someone's helmet or head is really, really cool to see. So that was fun. That was very enjoyable. But as you may be noticing, this is going to be a challenging weapon to get familiar with and use. Minus 25 movement speed penalty is noticeable, so you're going to be competing with the likes of Falchion. Not to mention, Short Sword also got a slight nerf, so your movement speed while attacking is going to be damaged or hurt. Minus 25%, I think, instead of minus 10% movement speed while attacking with Short Sword now. So everything's going to feel a little bit more cumbersome. I'm used to Arming Sword, Short Sword, full speed, full send, and this feels somewhat more weighty. You don't feel like you can freely roam around as easily, which is why I took the Castellan, because I didn't want to really get into the whole short sword testing yet. I just took this dagger because I knew what to expect. And this dagger really lets me down here. If I find another barbarian, I'm going to force this weapon into situations I maybe shouldn't. Start landing some decent shots, and then the game decides, let's swing with the Castellan, and the old right-click bug screwed me here. But you will see, right there, that reach, we got outreached by a Viking sword, and honestly, it seemed like he was quite far back, so maybe he clipped my arm or something, but if we could have landed that blow, we win, or if we didn't switch to Castellan, we win that exchange, which is kind of nice to see. We have enough damage to 1v1 a Barbarian with Viking sword, and if everything went smoothly and we didn't have that little weird bug happen, we would have been fine. So, is Warhammer any good? This is so early on. Like, this is just basically a video to show you guys what it does and its potential. But, if you're comparing it to its competitors, like the Flange Mace, I would think it's much easier to land hits with this than the Flange Mace. Flange Mace, the vertical up and down swings can be so difficult on a high speed, high mobility target. You will hit your target a lot more with this weapon. And as you're seeing here, this is like the map rotation every 30 minutes and some of the options you have. But yes, you will land way more hits. The sideways sweeping attacks are so perfect for just sweeping through rogues or anything that you're just trying to land any bit of damage on. Here is the issue. This is going to be the issue for anyone running Slayer Fighter. Everything has become way more difficult. Longsword with Riposte is one of the basically hardest counters against Slayer Fighter, not to mention they usually wear plate. Longsword got a buff, and its movement speed penalty is now only -30. So you're going to be moving slower than most Longsword users if you're using the same type of gear, which is scary. That thing swings very, very quickly and does crazy damage, especially if they can land Riposte or parry. Also, Shortsword got nerfed. The movement speed penalty on it and the move speed penalty while swinging, nerfed. Longbow damage increased. Quick shot duration decreased. So Rangers got a buff, and Longbow already deleted you quite quickly if you're going Slayer Fighter because you have no helmet, or just really shitty helmet options. Headshot damage was horrible. Crossbow, your weapon of choice to deal with other plated characters like Cleric or another plate fighter where you're basically just trading crossbow bolts back and forth, hoping you're a better ranger. Also nerfed. So basically, we're hoping Warhammer is the saving grace for Slayer Fighter, but truthfully, this is probably going to be the most challenging time in quite a while for Slayer Fighters. Not to mention, in those same patch notes, Rogue daggers get buffed. So Rogues are going to be jumping on stealth, dealing more damage than they were in the past, and quite frankly, they were very, very challenging to deal with on Slayer Fighter anyway. You got blown up. You do not have a lot of HP unless you're stacking a ton of vigor, and a Rogue out of ambush is just really, really strong, and it will be even better now. So I think overall, Slayer Fighter's not in a great spot. You're going to see numerous PDR fighters, and I think they adjusted some of the PDR values towards the end, and we'll see it here. There's a kind of group of guys that are teaming up. It is so difficult to deal with any sort of PDR fighter setup as Slayer Fighter, and they are everywhere. And now we're going to see a lot more longswords, which is a very, very strong counter to your arming sword Slayer Fighter. I don't know. It's going to be tough. Warlock, Falchion, Blow, Corruption, decent damage. Cleric, tons of sustain if you bring range like this recurve bow, and Smite will deal lots of damage. And one of the main reasons why I run recurve bow is to deal with wizards, and also to pepper PDR fighters, or maybe even clerics, before they can get in fighting range. Sometimes works on barbarians if they're a little slower. You can sprint away, deal lots of range damage, and kind of disengage with your second wind. It's going to be way more challenging. Viking sword increases makes barbarian a little bit better, and that's already the biggest counter to Slayer Fighter setup. If you're playing against a barb, is just straight up melee engagements where they have more HP, higher damage on their Viking sword, and crazy amount of strength for power bonus when swinging. So a lot of what Slayer Fighter can do, I don't even know right now what would be a good matchup. Other Slayer Fighters, perhaps. Maybe Wizards, if you can get them in a bad situation. And then I guess you might be able to trade with Rogues sometimes, if you know where they're at. Or maybe soften them up with the crossbow or something. It's still gonna be a challenge. I just, truthfully, am a little bit worried about how challenging Slayer Fighter is going to become. I'm expecting to see an influx of longswords, and it's gonna be tough. Like we see here, Falchion is a crazy good weapon, and there was absolutely no Falchion changes. We were chopping through this guy's armor, trading against PDR is tough. So look, I thank you all. I hope you guys all enjoy the Warhammer. I will keep testing, keep trying. We'll see where Slayer Fighter ends up. But I have a feeling this patch is going to be pretty hard on the old Slayer Fighter. Pretty hard indeed. So thank you all, and I'll see you guys all in the next video. Cheers.